The haunted jail cell. The prison stood like an ominous shadow against the dull grey sky, its walls thick with age and stories better left untold. Among the guards assigned there was a man named Evan Cole, a seasoned officer who believed in duty and discipline. The facility housed some of the most dangerous criminals in the country, but one cell in particular held an almost mythical reputation, Cell 14. It was a place of whispered stories and nervous glances, the kind of place that even the most hardened guards avoided. Evan had heard the rumours, of course. The inmate who had occupied Cell 14, Marcus Reed, had been a notorious figure. Convicted for a string of brutal murders, Marcus had spent his final days in that cell before dying under mysterious circumstances. Official records claimed it was a heart attack, but those who had been there whispered of screams in the dead of night and a chilling sense of dread that lingered long after his death. Evan dismissed these as superstitions, the kind of tales that bored guards spun to pass the time. That was until Evan was assigned to Cell Block D, where Cell 14 lay dormant. The cell had been left unused for years, sealed off with a rusted padlock. Yet, the stories persisted. Some guards claimed to hear faint whispers when they passed by. Others reported feeling a sudden drop in temperature or an overwhelming sense of unease. Evan, a pragmatic man, ignored such tales until his first night shift. As he made his rounds, the fluorescent lights above flickered erratically, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. When he reached Cell 14, a cold draft brushed against his face, making him shiver despite the warm air circulating through the building. The cell was silent, its barred door covered in a thin layer of dust. Evan felt a strange compulsion to linger, his eyes drawn to the darkened interior. It was as if something was watching him, waiting. The next day, Evan decided to satisfy his curiosity. He requested the records of Marcus Reed, combing through the inmate's history. Marcus had been an enigma, a man of few words, but intense, piercing stares. His victims were all found with the same symbol carved into their foreheads, a crude circle with jagged edges, a symbol no one could decipher. What unsettled Evan the most was the final entry in the guard logs on the night Marcus died. The writing was erratic, the words barely legible. He's still here, watching, waiting. Evan began to notice subtle changes during his shifts. The air around Cell 14 felt heavier, like a storm waiting to break. Once, while patrolling late at night, he thought he heard faint murmurs coming from the cell. Steeling himself, he shone his flashlight through the bars, only to find emptiness. Yet, as he turned away, he felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, as though unseen eyes were following his every move.
The breaking point came one fateful night when Evan was alone on duty. The power unexpectedly went out, plunging the block into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie red glows across the corridor. As Evan made his way towards the control room, he passed Cell 14. To his horror, the padlock lay broken on the floor, the cell door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, Evan drew his flashlight and peered inside. The cell was empty, but the walls were covered in scratch marks, deep grooves that hadn't been there before. In the center of the room lay a crude drawing of the same jagged circle symbol that Marcus Reed had used on his victims. A faint whisper echoed through the cell, a single word repeated over and over, "Stay." Evan stumbled back, his flashlight flickering. The whispers grew louder, filling the corridor with an unnatural cacophony. Desperate to escape, he turned to run, only to find the hallway stretching endlessly before him. No matter how far he ran, he remained trapped in the same corridor, with Cell 14 always in sight. Hours seemed to pass in that twisted reality before Evan collapsed from exhaustion. When he awoke, he was back in the control room, the fluorescent lights humming softly above him. His colleagues found him pale and trembling, his uniform drenched in sweat. He tried to explain what had happened, but his words were met with skeptical glances and awkward chuckles. Evan resigned the next day, unable to bear the weight of what he had experienced. As he packed his belongings, he found a small slip of paper tucked into his locker. On it was the jagged circle symbol, drawn in what appeared to be blood. Years later, the prison was shut down and abandoned, deemed unsafe for operations. Locals avoided the site, claiming to hear screams and whispers emanating from the empty halls. Cell 14 remained untouched, its door sealed shut, but those brave enough to approach swore they could see faint scratch marks on the walls and a shadowy figure watching from within. Evan never spoke of that night again, but he carried the memories like a scar. No one believed him, but he knew the truth. Marcus Reed hadn't died in that cell. Whatever he had become, he was still there, and he was never alone.